So we'll start off with a little bit about who this mysterious Jake Robinson character is. I really consider myself an IT generalist. I'm not a specialist in any one area, but my experience ranges from telecommunications and networking to operating systems like Windows and Linux. And I also have a passion for security and, of course, VMware technologies. I'm currently a solutions architect for BlueLock, a leading vCloud data center provider, where I've helped build and design the BlueLock cloud infrastructure. I've also helped automate both the provider side and the client side tasks. And I also help clients on a daily basis design their virtual data centers and applications to run at BlueLock. I'm a VMware certified professional, and I help the community out a lot. I have a blog at geekafter5.com, and VMware has honored me with the VMware vExpert title for my work in the community. So what are we going to cover today? We're first going to describe the vCloud Director user. We won't be focusing on who is providing vCloud Director, but who is actually using vCloud Director. There's a big difference there. We'll then talk about the concepts that drive these users to the cloud and also to vCloud Director. After that, we'll get into the top 5 features in your vCloud Director organization. And then I'll show you some real running examples that I have in my own vCloud Director organization. Finally, we'll talk about where to go from here, and then answer any questions you have, and do a course giveaway at the end. So let's figure out who uses vCloud Director, specifically vCloud Director organizations. Again, we're not talking about the provider, but the actual user of vCloud Director. The first is the application owner. The application owner might be in charge of a web application. They might be in charge of Exchange or SharePoint. This vCloud Director user is in charge of making sure one application is up and running at all times. The second type of user is the business unit. So these types of users might be in charge of one or more applications. The marketing department might be a great example. So they might have a website to run and maybe some other blogs or other marketing campaigns that run as applications in the cloud. The business unit might actually be a small startup. So we've had experience where instead of investing in infrastructure, startups are coming to the cloud first, to figuring out what they need, and then maybe making the investment in their own infrastructure later on. The third type of user is the developer. So this type of user obviously is writing software. They need tools and infrastructure to build different versions of their software on and do all sorts of testing. They also need some automation, so some way of doing programmatic deployments of their application as well. And then there's the hybrid cloud admin. So this user might be a vCloud or vSphere admin back at their own IT shop. Or they may be the broker. So they may simply say, here's some resources for a particular business unit or application owner, and simply just hand off those resources. So the next question is, why are people choosing vCloud Director to run their applications? The first answer is agility, and these are very conceptual ideas, but they're really core around the concept of vCloud Director. So agility is the first one. You don't need to wait for IT after your business processes and approvals go through. we're seeing more and more of this concept of shadow IT, where these business units and application owners, rather than going through their IT department, are actually going to cloud providers such as Amazon and others to get their resources because it's fast, right? The next is flexibility. So vCloud Director allows the flexibility to change your resources on demand. So you're not stuck on like a small, medium, large, extra large type of instance or virtual machine. You can tune your virtual machines to 1 CPU or 2 CPU, and maybe you don't need 4 gig of RAM, but you need 3.5 gig of RAM. Those types of flexibility options are really another factor that draw people to vCloud Director. And the last is control. Application owners really want control over their infrastructure, and vCloud Director gives you that control both through the web UI and also the vCloud API, which enable third-party tools such as things like Power CLI and even third-party automation type toolkits. So a company called Scale Extreme or Nstratus both use the vCloud API. So it is on to the top 5 most useful features within vCloud Director, and the first useful feature is the Virtual Data Center. So what is a virtual data center exactly? Well, if you think of a physical data center with servers and storage, SAN maybe, hard drives, all that, it really boils down to a big pool of resources. And that's all a virtual data center is a big pool of resources. A certain amount of CPU, a certain amount of memory, and a certain amount of storage. The great thing about the virtual data center is its ability to be flexible. So in one scenario, I might need a certain amount of CPU memory and storage. I may need something completely different in another scenario. The virtual data center, because the resources are abstracted to just the basic resources, you don't need to worry about things like the underlying hosts and stuff like that. And if you go out and buy a server from Dell or HP, and then you need to go back and change your mind later about maybe how much memory you need in that server, that's very easy with a virtual data center to do. So there are 3 types of virtual data centers within vCloud Director. The first is pay-as-you-go, and this is typically what people think of when they think of cloud computing. So they instantiate a virtual machine and they pay for what they use. The concept really is that this is an unlimited resource. You can just keep growing and growing, and you simply just pay for whatever's powered on or however much storage you consume. The allocation pool is a little bit different, where you actually are given an actual pool of resources, and you can kind of slice and dice that virtual data center however you need it. So if I want a virtual machine, for instance, with 1 CPU and 8 gig of RAM, and another virtual machine with 2 CPUs and 4 gig of RAM, you're not bound to any one particular size virtual machine, so you can decide how you divvy that up. The allocation pool is great if you kind of know how much you're going to be using, and the provider can allocate a percentage of resources for you to that pool. Along the same lines, the last type of virtual data center allocation is the reservation pool. This is where you pay for 100% of the committed resources. So the difference between the allocation pool and the reservation pool is simply that one is more dedicated to the other. So in the allocation pool model, you might be given a 50% dedication of resources, and maybe they charge you a lower rate, or maybe they don't charge you for those reserved resources. So it's a way for your organization or department to save money by not committing 100% of those resources. With the reservation pool, you are committing to 100% of those resources. At the same time, they're reserved for you, but you're going to be paying for more money with those. So let's flip over to my vCloud Director organization and take a look at a couple of virtual data centers that I have set up here. Of course, I've been logged out. So inside vCloud Director, you can see various vApps running, which we'll talk about. But we can click on Manage Virtual Data Centers on the upper right-hand side here, and it'll take us to my two virtual data centers I have. You can see I have a pay-as-you-go virtual data center, and then I also have an allocation pool virtual data center. If I come over to Monitor, I can actually see how much I'm using in each one of these virtual data centers. So for instance, my allocation pool virtual data center, I've been assigned a certain amount of memory and a certain amount of storage and a certain amount of CPU, whereas the pay-as-you-go, you can see that there's really no monitors or meters for the CPU and memory side. They did put a limit on me with storage, but 2 terabytes is plenty of storage for me to use. So the next of our top 5 features in our vCloud Director organization is the virtual application, or vApp. So a vApp is really unique to VMware and not necessarily vCloud Director, but it is a VMware concept, and it's the idea that you can group multiple virtual machines together that serve up a single application. So if you think of a multi-tier web application, for instance, you might have multiple web servers, you may have an application tier within your web application, and then a database tier as well. So a vApp, first and foremost, groups these virtual machines together so you can control them as a single application. So I can power on and power off the vApp, which powers on and powers on all of the virtual machines within my vApp. And I can orchestrate all that as well. So if I want them to start up or shut down in a certain order, I can do all that within a vApp. In addition to a simple grouping of virtual machines, vApps can have their own networks as well. So as you can see in this diagram, there's this vApp network that only exists to communicate with my database server. So as kind of a concept of security, if I don't want that database server to be able to talk anywhere else, I can isolate it like I've done in this diagram. And then you can connect vApp networks to other external networks as well. So maybe attached to one vApp network, I have it hooked up directly to the internet, or maybe another organization level network. So let's pop back over to vCloud Director and take a peek at one of my vApps here. So I'm going to come back to Cloud. And you can see that I have multiple vApps running here. This is kind of the list view. You can come back home and kind of see a graphical view of the vApps. We'll take a look at my production web app here. We're just going to open this up. And you can see it's a lot like my diagram. So I've got this SQL vApp network that's private, and then I've got this web vApp network that's hooked up again to another network. This little firewall icon here is our vShield Edge, and we'll talk about that in a minute. What the other thing that I want to show you is this orchestration. So I mentioned the starting and stopping of VMs and how we can start these up and stop them. So you can see I have an order here. 0 is kind of the first one in my order. So my SQL server starts out first, and then my web servers start. And there's a boot delay for each of these web servers. So I want to make sure my database server is up and running before my web servers start. Pretty simple. The stop action is to go in and shut down the OS cleanly rather than just a hard power off. We want my database server to flush its queue and everything. So the next feature in our top 5 is the vShield Edge, which I just mentioned. So in this diagram, you might have seen the VSE or vShield Edge icon in the previous slide. And in this diagram, I have 2 different vShield Edge devices. So the first one is at the vApp level. It's actually on my vApp network. And then the second one is on an organization level network. So I can have multiple layers of security. So this organization level vShield Edge, kind of protects the entire organization, and then this vApp vShield Edge protects this particular vApp. So it isolates the vApp. So we'll pop back over to vCloud Director once again, and we'll continue in our production web app, and we'll look at some of the features that vShield Edge gives us. So under my web vApp that you can see here, it is connected to another network, and 2 of the features right off the bat that we can see that vShield Edge gives us are NAT and firewall. So if I right-click on this network and click Configure Services, you can see these are the vShield Edge features at the vApp level. So DHCP is one. If I want my virtual machines on this vApp network to dynamically get an IP address, I can enable that. Firewall is a big one. So you can see that I have inbound firewall rules for various services. These are web servers. So I want people to be able to get to my website. So I allow that traffic in. And I've got some other monitoring services here as well. Adding a firewall rule is very easy. You can put it in a name, source, destination, etc. NAT rules allow me to translate the IP addresses to other networks, which comes in very handy when we talk a little bit about the vCloud catalog and deploying vApps from the catalog. And then there's some static routing features as well. So in the event that you need to route one vApp to another one, you can use the static routing feature. So those are the vShield Edge features at the vApp level. Let's go back home and take a look at our organization level network and see what other features that we have. So under this routed network, if we click on Configure Services, you can see that we have the same DHCP firewall. We've got some NAT and NAT mapping and some static routing, but in addition, we have this site-to-site VPN feature, which is really cool. So you can see that I've created this VPN tunnel from my organization, maybe to my private cloud, or maybe to another development environment, or maybe even another public cloud provider. And this is all secure communication using IPsec VPN and the vShield Edge device. The next feature and our most useful features is the vCloud API. And I mentioned earlier that the vCloud API enables third-party services and tools. 3 of those tools that are freely available from VMware, with a minor exception maybe, are listed here. So the first one is vCloud Connector. So for the hybrid cloud admin, this is a very useful tool to migrate workloads back and forth to and from your vCloud organization, as well as give you a view of both your infrastructure. So you might view your vSphere infrastructure and your cloud infrastructure in the same window. The next one is vCenter Orchestrator. I mentioned there was a little caveat, and this is kind of the guy. In order to use vCenter Orchestrator, you need a vCenter license or a vSphere license. After that, it's essentially free. But what Orchestrator does is really gives you this this complex workflow engine, which allows you to do some really cool things like create a front-end web-based application request system. So, for instance, if you have sales guys that would like to do software demos or whatever, you could simply put a kind of a simple web front end in front of Orchestrator, and then Orchestrator will handle all the complex workflow tasks on the back end to deploy the application. The last one, and my most favorite, is VMware Power CLI. And Power CLI gives you a command line interface to your vCloud Director organization. And there are a lot of cool things that you can do through the vCloud API that you can't do through the web UI. And Power CLI, I found, is the most simple way to enable some of those features. So, for example, expanding a hard disk or a virtual disk on the fly can't be done through the web UI, whether or not the virtual machine is powered on. But you can do it through the vCloud API, and Power CLI makes that very simple to do. The same thing with cloning, hot cloning, and then adding disks while the virtual machine is powered on. All can be done through the API and cannot be done through the web UI. So very useful tools to know. Even if you don't learn the vCloud API, learning one of these tools can be very useful. So the next in our top 5 features is the vCloud catalog. And I believe this is our last in the top 5 features. But so the vCloud catalog is very cool. If you're a hybrid cloud admin, you may think of a virtual machine template. vCloud Director takes it one step further and gives you entire vApp templates. So instead of just a single virtual machine and an operating system, I can create a template out of my entire multi-tiered application, including network settings, IP addresses, guest OS customization, firewall rules. All of that can be encompassed inside of a vApp template, and then I can deploy that over and over again without having to configure each one of my virtual machines. vCloud catalogs also allow you to upload application or OS media as well in the form of ISO files or even floppy files, which is a little antiquated, but I suppose I can see the need for that. So after I upload an ISO image of a CD or a DVD, then I can simply attach that media to a virtual machine and go forth and install the operating system or application. The other part of the vCloud catalog is the concept of OVF, or Open Virtualization Format. So OVF allows me to transport my vApps and virtual machines from cloud to cloud in really a non-lock-in type format. So I can download my virtual machines and vApps anytime that I want to, and then simply run them wherever else I want, as long as they support OVF, which is an open standard. So within the vCloud catalog, I can upload virtual machines and download virtual machines in this OVF format. So let's take a pop back over to our vCloud Director organization and take a look at our catalog. So you can see that I have a private catalog here. Your vCloud provider might also have a public catalog as well. So let's take a peek at the public catalog first. And you can see that this particular provider has a number of Windows operating systems that we can deploy from, as well as Red Hat and a couple freebies in Ubuntu and CentOS. So adding these to my cloud is as simply as clicking the add to my cloud button. So really a one-click deploy. It can go through customization for you as well if that's enabled on the vApp template. Under my vCloud catalog, and I see I have a little error in there. That's completely my fault. You can see that under my production web app vApp template, I have multiple servers in there. So if I ever deploy from this particular vApp, it deploys all three of those servers. And again, you saw my production web app running. It has firewall rules in there. It has network settings. All of that is copied over. One of the cool features about vShield Edge, because everything is NATed, I can really duplicate IP addresses and MAC addresses as long as they're in isolated networks behind a vShield Edge. So when it comes to developers needing to test a particular configuration over and over again without having to reconfigure something, then vCloud Director vApp templates make that really easy to do. So that's really a combination of all the different technologies. So that is the top 5. I hope you got some good information about that. The question becomes, where do we go from here? So if I need more help on vCloud Director for my particular use case or a particular feature within vCloud Director, here are a few helpful ideas. So the first is the integrated help within vCloud Director. Real quick, I'll pop back over and show you. In the upper right, there's simply the help button that you can click on, and it'll take you right to a searchable index of all the different features within your vCloud Director organization. The next is the vCloud Director User Guide. This has some good information, kind of a good reference to look at the different features of your organization. Newly announced is the vCloud Service Evaluation. So this was publicly announced this morning. And the service evaluation will allow you to essentially, for a low cost, simply a credit card swipe, go in and get a trial vCloud organization that you can go deploy example applications or really do a proof of concept before either deploying your own vCloud provider service, or if you're one of those use cases like an application owner, really trying it out before you go with a vCloud provider. There are a few different vCloud providers that provide free trials as well, so if you're uncomfortable with the credit card swipe, then you can work with a provider with a free trial as well. And then last but not least is the Trained Signal vCloud Director Organizations course. You know, it's kind of a shameless plug there. And we're going to be going into depth on some various use cases for your vCloud organization and applications and how to configure different things, such as vCloud Director networking within your organization as well. So with that, I will turn it over to Chris, and I believe he, if you guys have any questions, go ahead and post them in the chat.
All right, Jake. We have a couple questions. The first refers to the part of your presentation, tools using the vCloud API. The question from Charles is, does the site-to-site VPN run on the edge server VM?
Yes, so the vShield Edge device is really a virtual machine running on resources within your vCloud director organization. So the VPN um, is not tied to any shared hardware or anything like that. That vShield Edge device belongs to you, and it's dedicated to your organization.
Okay. The next question from Brandon is referring to the vShield Edge. Do they pay for the licensing on the OS?
Yeah, depending. That's a great question. So depending on your provider, companies like Microsoft have things like service provider licensing agreements, and they simply charge you a daily or monthly rate for the operating system or application licenses. So in the end, the vCloud organization does use it. If your provider is an internal private cloud, then your IT organization would pay for that. It really depends on your provider. Good question. All right, so if there are no more questions, I will say thank you again for attending the webinar. Keep an eye out for the vCloud Director Organizations course, which is really all about vCloud Director users and running applications in the cloud. So thank you again for attending, and I'll turn it back over to Chris once again to, I believe, give away a copy of the course.
Yep. That's all the time we have today. Thanks again for attending and for your participation. As a reminder, today's webinar was recorded and will be available to view at trainsignal.com/blog/webinars. We will also email you the link by the end of this week. And remember, as you leave, please fill out the survey for a chance to win a copy of Jake's upcoming VMware vCloud Director Organizations video training. We will email the winner by the end of the week. Thanks again, and have a great day.